everything you know about the start of human civilization is wrong. A single discovery on a remote hill in Turkey has shattered the old story, forcing a complete rewrite of our history. This is the mystery of, by the end of this journey, you will understand how a collection of carved stone pillars is upending centuries of scientific theory. We are talking about a temple so staggeringly old, it was already ancient when the pyramids were built, created by a society that should not have existed. Who were these master builders, and what powerful idea compelled them to erect a monument for the ages? How does it feel to watch the foundations of history crumble and be rebuilt before your eyes? A shepherd's simple observation would become the key to unlocking a forgotten world. For generations, people living near that hill in southeastern Turkey had seen the odd, smooth stones breaking the surface of the earth. They called the place, which translates to hill, a name that speaks to its rounded shape rather than any hint of its hidden grandeur. To the local community, these stones were just part of the landscape, perhaps the remnants of an old graveyard, nothing to warrant a second look from the wider world. This perspective changed forever in the year 1994. Archaeologist, having read a brief report about the site, decided to make the journey to see it for himself. What he found was not a collection of random rocks. The stones were too smooth, too deliberately shaped. They were made of limestone, a material that does not occur naturally on the hilltop, meaning they had been brought there, carved and erected by human hands. Immediately recognized the style of the stonework. It belonged to the pre-pottery Neolithic era, a period long before the invention of writing, metal tools, or even basic pottery. But the scale was all wrong. Nothing from that time, believed to be a simple era of small hunter-gatherer bands, should have been this massive, this organized, this ambitious. In that moment, looking across hill, understood he was standing on something that every established narrative. A single glance told him our story of human beginnings was incomplete, and this quiet hill held the first chapter of a new one. The true excavation was about to begin, and what it would reveal was far stranger than anyone could have predicted. The sheer age of this place is the first and most profound mystery. Radiocarbon dating tells us the stones were carved and erected in a window of time between 9,600 and 8,000 years before the Common Era. Let those numbers settle for a moment. This sanctuary is over 11,000 years old. To grasp that distance, we need to shift our entire frame of reference. The Great Pyramid of Giza, that iconic symbol of ancient achievement, would not rise for another 6,000 years. The first forms of writing in Mesopotamia were still 7 in the future. This temple predates Stonehenge, predates the wheel, predates the very idea of settled farming villages. It is a monument from a world so remote it feels almost mythical. And that is what makes it an anomaly that cracks the foundation of history. For over a century, the story was clear and logical. First, humans learned to farm. Agriculture produced surplus food, which allowed for specialization, which led to complex societies, and only then did those societies have the resources and organization to build monumental temples and pyramids. It was a tidy step-by-step progression. Stands that story on its head. Here is a massive, breathtakingly sophisticated spiritual center, built not by farmers with granaries full of grain, but by people who lived by hunting and gathering. They moved with the seasons, following herds of animals and stands of wild plants. According to everything we thought we knew, these people should have been too busy surviving to coordinate the quarrying, transportation, and artistic carving of ton-stone pillars. They should not have had a reason to build something meant to last for generations. This discovery forces a radical question. What if the drive to create, to build something greater than ourselves for a purpose beyond mere survival, what if that came first? What if the human need to gather, to believe, to make meaning together, was the original spark that eventually led us to settle down and invent everything else? Suggests our cultural evolution did not follow a straight line. It was a dance, a complex back and forth between our inner worlds of belief and our outer world of technology. The builders of this hilltop sanctuary were not primitive. They were pioneers of a different kind, and their legacy is only just beginning to speak to us. The physical reality of what they built is almost impossible to grasp from a distance. You have to walk among the stones. The site is not a single structure, but a series of at least 20 circular enclosures, like great stone nests carved into the hilltop. Each one is defined by a ring of massive T-shaped limestone pillars, and in the center of each ring stand 2 even larger pillars looming over the entire space. These central columns are monumental, some towering over 5.5 meters tall, the height of a two-story building. They are not rough blocks. They are carefully shaped, smoothed, and finished, and they are heavy. Each one weighs between 10 and 20 tons. That is the equivalent of 3 or 4 full-grown elephants. Now, picture the process. These stones were from solid bedrock ridges nearly a kilometer away. Using only stone hammers and bone chisels, workers carved them free. Then, without wheels, without metal tools, and without domesticated animals like oxen to pull them, they moved these ton pillars across the rugged landscape. Finally, they lifted them upright and set them into precisely carved sockets in the ground. This was not a weekend project. This was a generational undertaking that required staggering coordination. It demanded planners who could envision the final form, overseers who could manage teams, and skilled artisans who knew how to shape the stone. It required a society that could feed and organize hundreds of people for months or years at a time. This level of specialization and social complexity simply does not fit the old image of small, scattered bands of hunter-gatherers, living hand to mouth. Proves they were capable of so much more. They were architects of the impossible, and their silent, steadfast pillars are a testament to a forgotten chapter of human ambition. But if the scale of the construction baffles us, the artistry carved into the stone opens a window into their minds, revealing a world both familiar and profoundly strange. These silent stone figures hold the second great mystery. The T-shaped pillars are the soul of, and they are far more than simple architecture. Look closely, and the abstraction begins to resolve into a familiar form. The broad horizontal top is a stylized head. The long vertical shaft is a body. On some of these pillars, you can see arms carved in shallow relief, bent at the elbows with hands meeting over where the stomach would be. A belt or a simple loincloth is often depicted. There is no mistaking the intent. These are human forms, rendered in stone on a colossal scale. They are not portraits of individuals, but rather ideals, archetypes standing in perfect silent rows. They are arranged in circles like a council frozen in time, all oriented inward, facing the center of the enclosure. And at that center stand two pillars that are even more massive, the focal point of the entire ring. The effect is profound and intentional. It creates a sacred space, a defined arena where something important happened. The gathered pillars are not an audience of the living, but perhaps a congregation of the remembered. Researchers suggest they may represent ancestors, watchful spirits, or deities, their stone gaze overseeing the rituals performed within the circle. They are eternal witnesses from a world without writing, their very presence meant to connect the community to something timeless and greater than themselves. This transforms the enclosures from mere buildings into theaters of meaning. The people who gathered here were not just building a roof over their heads, they were constructing a bridge between their world and another. They were literally surrounding themselves with stone embodiments of their beliefs, creating a physical space where the human and the spiritual realms could meet. The silent conversation between these pillars, across 11,000 years, is a whisper about what it means to be human, to honor, to gather, and to seek. But if the forms of the pillars are mysterious, the intricate world carved upon their surfaces pulls us even deeper into the minds of their creators. The stone bodies of these pillars are not blank slates, they are canvases. Covering their broad surfaces is a menagerie of another world, carved with breathtaking precision and life. Foxes coil in spirals, their tails flowing into intricate patterns. A massive wild boar seems to charge from the stone, muscles tensed. Serpents slither, cranes stand poised, and lions stalk with a quiet, predatory grace. These are not casual doodles or simple pictographs meant only to identify. Look at the fluidity of the lines, the careful attention to anatomical detail, the sense of movement frozen in limestone. This is a symbolic language, a complex system of meaning etched into the very fabric of their sanctuary. Each animal is a character in a story we can no longer hear. Researchers believe these creatures likely held deep significance, perhaps representing different totemic clans who came together to build this place, or acting as spiritual guides and protectors for the community. The choice of subjects is telling. Many are dangerous predators or scavengers, creatures of power, death, and the untamed wild. Their prevalence suggests a belief system intimately connected to the forces of nature, one that did not shy away from the cycle of life, but sought to understand and perhaps appease it through ceremony. This rich iconography reveals a mythological mind already at work, crafting narratives to explain their world and their place within it. They were telling their story, not with ink on parchment, but with flint on stone, creating a permanent record of their beliefs before the first written word. We are left as outsiders, trying to read a book where we know the alphabet but have forgotten the grammar. The silent conversation of the pillars is given voice through these animals, a whisper about power, community, and the sacred wild. Yet for all its grandeur, this entire complex carries one final, haunting signature from its creators. But why go to such extraordinary lengths? The purpose of these stone circles is the fifth great mystery of what exactly happened within these rings that justified a century of back-breaking labor. The archaeologist who dedicated his life to the site developed a compelling theory. He saw it not as a village or a fortress, but as the world's first known temple complex, a cathedral on a hill. The evidence points to a place designed for gathering, for ceremony, and for forging bonds far stronger than stone. The layout itself is a clue. Each circular enclosure, with its ring of watching pillars and its towering central dome, creates a powerful, focused space. It feels intentional, like an arena or a theater. This was not a place for everyday living. Researchers found no evidence of permanent hearths, trash pits, or domestic buildings. Instead, they discovered something else. Among the stones, they unearthed vast quantities of animal bones from aurochs, wild gazelle, and boar. But these were not the scattered remains of simple meals. The bones showed signs of being butchered and processed on a massive scale, suggesting organized, large-scale feasting. Picture this scene. After long seasons apart, following the herds, different bands of people would travel to this sacred hill. They would bring offerings, perhaps the finest of their hunt. Within the stone circles, under the gaze of the ancestral pillars and the watchful animal spirits carved into the walls, they would come together. They would share in a great feast, a ritual that reinforced their shared identity, their common beliefs, and their mutual obligations. This was more than a meal. It was a social glue. In a world without written laws or kings, these gatherings were the fabric of society. They fostered cooperation on a scale previously unimaginable for hunter-gatherers, allowing them to plan, to labor together, and to create something permanent for their collective spirit. May have been the engine of civilization itself, not born from surplus grain, but from a shared need to belong to something greater. Yet this profound purpose leads to an even deeper puzzle. If this place was so central, so vitally important, why did its builders ultimately choose to walk away from it? Forever the most profound act at it was not its construction, but its deliberate end. After centuries of use, around 8,000 years before the Common Era, the people who cherished this place made a staggering decision. They did not abandon it to the wind and weather. Instead, they performed a careful, monumental act of closure. They gathered hundreds of tons of earth, rubble, and limestone chips, and they gently, systematically buried their entire sanctuary. They filled the great stone circles from the ground up, completely entombing the pillars and their intricate carvings. This was no accidental collapse or sudden disaster. The fill material is clean, layered, and deliberate. It is the archaeological equivalent of a community carefully placing a treasured heirloom into a velvet-lined box, closing the lid, and storing it away. Why would they do this? Why go to such immense effort to hide a place that must have been the very heart of their world? The theories are as fascinating as the act itself. Some researchers believe this was a sacred retirement. Perhaps the beliefs associated with the old animal carvings and T-shaped pillars were evolving, giving way to new ideas. Burying the temple could have been a respectful way to deconsecrate it, to put the old gods to rest without violating their space. Others suggest it was an act of profound preservation, a way to protect the sacred symbols of their ancestors from being worn away or defiled by future generations who might not understand their significance. They were creating a time capsule, ensuring that their story, carved in stone, would survive intact for an age they could not even imagine. In a way, they succeeded beyond their wildest dreams. That protective blanket of soil is precisely what saved the carvings from erosion, keeping the foxes sharp, the boars fierce, and the pillars standing straight. It was this final, reverent act of burial that handed their legacy, perfectly preserved, across 11,000 years, directly to us. Their silent gift forces us to ask what we today would be willing to so carefully inter for the sake of those who come after us. This is the heart of the revolution. Shatters the old, comforting image of our early ancestors as simple, small groups just struggling to get by. For over a century, the story told in textbooks was clear and linear. First, humans discovered agriculture. farming created a stable food surplus. That surplus allowed people to settle in one place, which led to population growth, specialization of labor, and eventually, the complex social structures needed to build temples and monuments. Civilization, we were told, was a product of the farm. Stands this entire sequence on its head. Here we have a monumental, breathtakingly sophisticated spiritual center, built a full 6,000 years before the pyramids by people who did not farm. They were hunter-gatherers. This single fact forces a radical and thrilling reevaluation of what these societies were truly capable of. The scale of the work tells the story. Quarrying 20-ton pillars of limestone, moving them nearly a kilometer across rough terrain, carving them with intricate art, and erecting them in precise circles was not a casual project. This required a large, coordinated labor force, likely drawn from multiple bands across a wide geographical area. Think about what that implies. It means these mobile groups maintained connections and shared a common identity strong enough to come together for a purpose that spanned generations. It suggests a level of social organization, planning, and leadership we never attributed to them. Someone had to design the enclosures. Others had to specialize in quarrying stone, becoming experts with their flint tools. Some likely took on the role of ritual leaders, overseeing the ceremonies that bound the community together. This points to a society with surplus resources, not of grain, but of time, skill, and social cohesion. They could afford to divert energy from immediate survival to a project that served a different kind of need, a spiritual and social one. The most powerful resource they had was a shared idea, a motivating belief so compelling it could mobilize people season after season, decade after decade, to create something for the ages. This turns the traditional model inside out. Is proof that complex social behavior, sophisticated symbolic thought, and the drive to build monuments did not emerge from farming. They flourished independently, within the rich tapestry of hunter-gatherer life. The seed of civilization was not planted in a field of wheat. It was nurtured in the human mind, in the need to come together to believe and to create meaning. This revelation does not diminish the achievement of later farmers and city builders, but it profoundly expands our understanding of the human journey. It asks us to see our earliest ancestors not as primitive precursors waiting to evolve, but as innovators in their own right, architects of a different kind of complexity. And if they could achieve this without settling down, it makes their ultimate decision to leave this sacred hill all the more mysterious. This leads us to a revolutionary idea, one that turns our understanding of human progress inside out once more. What if was not just a stunning precursor to agriculture, but the very catalyst that sparked it? The lead archaeologist proposed exactly this. He looked at the vast quantities of animal bones and the evidence of large-scale feasting, and he saw a new kind of problem. Sustaining hundreds of people gathered for rituals, perhaps for weeks at a time, would have placed an incredible strain on the local environment. Hunting parties would have had to range farther and farther to bring back enough game. The wild grasses and plants gathered for food would have been quickly depleted around the site. This created a powerful new pressure, a logistical challenge born from community and belief, not from hunger. The solution, suggested, may have been a fateful step toward control. To reliably feed these sacred gatherings, people might have begun to deliberately cultivate the wild plants they already relied upon. They could have started sowing seeds of wild wheat and barley in plots near the site, tending them, and protecting them to ensure a predictable harvest for the next great feast. This is the feasting theory, and it places the hilltop sanctuary at the very center of one of humanity's greatest transformations. The geography makes this idea strikingly plausible. Sits like a sentinel overlooking the rolling plains of Upper Mesopotamia, the northern arc of the legendary Fertile Crescent. This region is the genetic homeland of domesticated einkorn wheat, a fact confirmed by modern botanists. The wild ancestors of the grains that would feed empires grew right there, in the shadow of the stone pillars. It is a compelling scene to envision. On the hilltop, people conducted ceremonies that bound them together. On the plains below, they may have conducted the first purposeful experiments with the land, learning to encourage and later to domesticate the wild grasses. In this view, agriculture did not emerge slowly from countless small, isolated attempts. It was accelerated by a specific, powerful need, the need to sustain a sacred idea. The temple did not come from the farm. The farm may have come from the temple. This reframes the entire agricultural revolution. It suggests that our shift from foraging to farming was not merely a practical adaptation for survival. It was, at least in part, a cultural innovation, driven by the human desire to gather, to celebrate, and to fulfill collective obligations to something greater than the individual. The stones stand as silent witnesses to a moment when ritual necessity may have literally reshaped the landscape and the future of our species. If this hypothesis holds, then the true legacy of those hunter-gatherer builders is not just a mysterious temple, but the very foundations of the settled world that would follow. This unique character becomes even clearer when we place it alongside other ancient wonders. To truly grasp what makes an outlier, we need to see it in context, to compare its purpose and design with other sites from humanity's early chapters. Around the same time first circles were being erected, another famous site was taking shape far to the south, Jericho. Known for its impressive stone wall and tower, Jericho represents a different kind of early human achievement. Its structures were fundamentally about protection, about creating a defined and defensible space for a community to live. While remarkable, Jericho's architecture served a practical, earthly need. Its towering pillars, in stark contrast, served no obvious defensive or residential purpose. They point upward, not outward, designed for ceremony, not security. Jump forward a few thousand years and we encounter a sprawling Neolithic town in central Turkey. Here we find a fascinating glimpse into domestic and artistic life, with homes decorated by vivid wall paintings of hunting scenes and abstract patterns. Yet, for all its complexity, lacks any single massive communal structure like the stone circles on the hill. Its focus was inward, on the family dwelling and the rituals of the home. Its focus was expansively outward and upward, on creating a shared sacred space that transcended any one household. This distinction is crucial. It highlights a society that channeled its collective energy and skill into a project with no practical return, a monument to belief itself. Even the later icons of antiquity, the pyramids of Giza or the stepped ziggurats of Mesopotamia, arrived on the scene later. They were built by established kingdoms with centralized power, vast economies, and stratified societies. Predates all of that. It was not a project of a pharaoh commanding slaves, but seemingly a voluntary, collaborative endeavor by hunter-gatherer communities. This places it in a category all its own, a purely ceremonial megastructure from a time before kings, before empires, before cities. It represents a distinct pathway in our cultural development, one where the human impulse to create meaning and gather in reverence may have been the primary engine for monumental achievement. In a world where early efforts often went into walls for safety or homes for shelter, the people of this hill invested their greatest labor in something intangible, a conversation with the cosmos carved in stone. That choice, preserved for over 11,000 years, asks us what we prioritize today, and what of our own world we are building for the ages to discover. Yet the carvings may hold a meaning that reaches far beyond the earth. To truly understand the minds behind these pillars, some researchers have turned their gaze upward, toward the stars. Could the intricate menagerie of foxes, scorpions, and birds be more than spiritual symbols? Could they be a prehistoric star map, an early astronomical code etched in stone? This compelling theory suggests the animal figures represent specific constellations as they appeared in the night sky 11,000 years ago. For a society deeply attuned to the rhythms of nature, tracking the seasons was not a matter of convenience, but of survival. Knowing when the herds would migrate or when certain plants would fruit was essential. The stars provided a reliable, unchanging calendar. If the fox carving corresponded to a star pattern that rose at the beginning of spring, and the scorpion marked the onset of autumn, then these pillars become more than art. They become a functional guide, a permanent record of celestial knowledge passed down through generations. The very layout of the stone circles adds weight to this idea. Who study how ancient peoples understood the sky have noted that the placement of certain pillars and enclosures might align with the rising or setting of significant stars, or even the solstice sun. Imagine a ceremony timed perfectly so that the first rays of the winter solstice sunrise streamed directly through an entrance to illuminate a central pillar, adorned with a specific animal. In that moment, architecture, art, and the cosmos would unite in a powerful display of understanding. While this remains a speculative theory without definitive proof, it aligns perfectly with what we know from countless later cultures, from Stonehenge to the pyramids, who wove their knowledge of the heavens into their sacred structures. If true, it transforms our understanding of purpose once again. It would mean this hilltop was not only a temple for gathering and a catalyst for change, but also a sophisticated observatory. Here, cosmology and religion were inseparable. The pillars served as a three-dimensional library, holding the secrets of the sky in solid form, guiding both ritual life and the practical needs of a community intimately connected to the turning world. This potential dual purpose shows a breathtaking depth of thought, where every carved line could serve both the spirit and the survival of the people. The builders themselves remain the seventh and most personal mystery of this place. Who were the people who looked at a bare hilltop and saw a cathedral? We will never know the name they called themselves, the sound of their language, or the specific stories they told around their fires. Their identity is written not in words, but in the choices they made and the world they left behind. From the fragments they did leave, we can assemble a portrait. Genetically, they were part of the ancestral populations of the wider Fertile Crescent, the deep roots of many peoples who would come later. They were master craftsmen of stone, creating razor-sharp blades and delicate tools from obsidian, a volcanic glass that had to be traded from sources hundreds of kilometers away. This reveals a network of connections, a web of exchange and communication across a vast landscape. Their art shows they were not just observers of nature, but profound students of it. Every muscle on a charging boar, the coiled tension of a serpent, the graceful neck of a crane, these were carved by people who watched, who understood, and who revered the creatures they lived alongside. This was not simple decoration. It was a symbolic language, a complex system of meaning that spoke of a rich inner world. This suggests a society likely organized around kinship and shared belief. Many researchers propose that the different animal symbols dominating certain pillars could represent distinct clans or social groups. A fox clan, a crane clan, a lion clan, each contributing to the communal effort, each bringing their own identity to be woven into the greater whole of the sanctuary. In this light becomes a physical treaty, a monument to unity carved in stone. They were the intellectual and spiritual forebears of everything that followed. The first farmers who later tamed wheat, the first villagers who built towns like, the first city planners of Mesopotamia, they all stood on the shoulders of these earlier pioneers. The builders of the hilltop were a sophisticated culture whose specific name is lost to the wind, but whose legacy is the very notion that humans can come together to create something timeless for a purpose beyond survival. They answered a call we still hear today, the call to build, to belong, and to seek meaning under the same stars. The silence of the stones is echoed by an absence on the ground. Archaeologists digging through the layers had made a crucial observation. They found no foundations for permanent houses, no central hearths for daily family cooking, no deep pits filled with the ordinary refuse of a settled community. This missing piece of the puzzle is profound. It tells us this hilltop was never a home. It was a destination. People did not live among these towering pillars. They journeyed to them. This reinforces a revolutionary idea about the site's purpose. It was a specialized ceremonial center, a prehistoric pilgrimage site used for periodic, powerful gatherings. Think of it not as a town, but as a cathedral built on a remote mountain, a place you travel to for specific, meaningful events. The people who built it likely lived elsewhere, in seasonal camps scattered across the surrounding plains and valleys, following the rhythms of the wild. When the time was right, perhaps marked by a solstice or a particular phase of the moon, they would pack their belongings and make their way to the sacred hill. They brought with them the fruits of their hunt and their gatherings, not to consume in private homes, but to share in a collective feast within the stone circles. This physical separation of spaces reveals a sophisticated mind at work. It shows a clear architectural and social intention to create a zone dedicated solely to the communal and the sacred, entirely distinct from the areas of daily life. This concept, the separation of the sacred from the everyday, is a landmark in human cultural development. It means these early people were not just building shelters. They were consciously designing landscapes of meaning, carving out a piece of the world and declaring it different, set apart for connection, ritual, and shared identity. The emptiness where houses should have been speaks as loudly as the filled spaces where the pillars stand. It tells us that 11,000 years ago, humanity had already learned to compartmentalize experience, to create special places for special purposes, a mental leap that continues to shape how we organize our world and our lives to this very day. The methods used to raise this sanctuary are in Stone Age engineering. With no metal, no wheels, and no beasts of burden, the builders have turned fundamental physics and profound cooperation into their greatest tools. Their toolkit was purely Neolithic, consisting of flint and obsidian scrapers, rounded hammerstones for pounding, and simple tools made from bone. Yet with these elemental instruments they achieved the impossible. To quarry the massive pillars, they likely employed a clever technique still used in some traditional stoneworking today. They would have carved a series of holes along a natural fracture line in the limestone bedrock. Into these holes they drove dry wooden wedges. Then they soaked the wedges with water. As the wood expanded with tremendous force, it would split the stone along a clean, predetermined line, freeing a ton block from the earth. This simple act of understanding material properties reveals a deep, accumulated knowledge passed down through generations. Moving these colossal stones was the next monumental challenge. Each pillar, weighing as much as 20 tons, had to travel nearly 500 meters from the quarry to the hilltop. The solution was a symphony of coordination. They likely placed the pillar atop a series of log rollers. Teams of people, perhaps hundreds strong, would then pull on ropes woven from strong plant fibers, leveraging their combined strength to inch the stone forward across the rugged landscape. Every step required precise communication and unified effort. A single misstep could mean a crushed limb or a shattered pillar. This was not haphazard construction. It was a meticulously planned operation that turned human muscle and simple machines into a geological force. Finally, the most delicate work began. Once the pillar was dragged into position and levered upright into its carved socket, the artists took over. Using smaller, razor-sharp flint tools called burins, they began the painstaking process of carving. The flowing lines of a fox, the textured hide of a boar, the subtle curve of an arm on a T-shaped figure, all were etched into the hard limestone with these tiny stone points. The precision and artistry speak to a lifetime of honed skill, a craft taught from one master carver to the next. This entire process, from quarry to carving, represents a breathtaking continuum of knowledge. It was applied physics made manifest through communal labor. Every smooth surface, every perfect circle, and every intricate animal is a testament to what human ingenuity can accomplish, not in spite of simple tools, but because of them. The true monument is not just the stone, but the invisible web of shared purpose that lifted it. The silent stones hold a blueprint for a forgotten society. To envision the sheer scale of this project is to glimpse the social world that made it possible. A single family, or even a small band, could never have moved a 20-ton pillar. The work required a community, organized and purposeful, operating under a shared vision. This implies a level of social structure far beyond what we once believed hunter-gatherers possessed. There must have been planners, individuals who could see the final form of the circles in their mind's eye and translate that vision into a step-by-step process. These were the first architects, not of homes, but of the sacred. They decided where each pillar would stand, how deep its socket must be carved, and which symbols would adorn its surface. Their authority was likely rooted not in force, but in knowledge, tradition, and spiritual insight. They guided a complex labor force. That labor itself was likely organized along the lines of kinship. The different animal symbols carved on the pillars offer a compelling clue. Perhaps a clan associated with the fox was responsible for quarrying a specific set of stones, while a crane clan specialized in the delicate work of carving. This would turn the construction into a form of living ritual, where each group contributed its identity to the greater whole, weaving their story directly into the stone. The work was almost certainly seasonal. It would have coincided with times of abundance, when wild grains were ripe and game was plentiful, freeing people from the constant daily search for food. These windows of opportunity became sacred work periods, where hundreds gathered not just to build, but to reaffirm their bonds through shared effort. This reveals a sophisticated understanding of time and resource management. But the most profound insight is not about logistics, it is about legacy. This project demanded a collective memory that could span generations. The elder who laid out the first circle knew he would not live to see it completed. He trusted that his children and their children would carry the vision forward. This demonstrates a shared purpose so powerful it could bind a society across decades, perhaps even centuries. They were not just building for themselves, they were building for ancestors they would never meet and descendants they would never know. This ability to plan across the horizon of a single lifetime, to invest in a future you will not see, is a hallmark of complex cultural thought. We once believed this long-term thinking only emerged with agriculture and written records. Proves it flourished much earlier, nurtured by a belief system profound enough to coordinate the labors of centuries. The true monument they built was not merely of limestone, but of trust, transmitted from one generation to the next. The world that built did not last forever. After perhaps 2,000 years of periodic use, the rhythm of footsteps and ceremony on the hilltop began to fade. The great gatherings grew less frequent, and the sounds of feasting and ritual fell silent. Eventually, the people who had so carefully maintained this sacred space performed their final act of devotion, burying the entire complex under a mountain of earth and stone. This was not a sudden collapse, but a gradual transition, a closing of one chapter as another began. The very forces that may have helped to set in motion were now reshaping human life in ways that made the old sanctuary less central. As agriculture took firm root across the Fertile Crescent, people were settling into permanent villages. Their lives became tethered to fields and harvests, to stored grain and domesticated animals. The old hunter-gatherer pattern of life, with its wide-ranging mobility and large seasonal congregations, was slowly becoming a memory. New centers of community and belief were emerging within the walls of these growing settlements, places integrated into daily life rather than set apart on a distant hill. The need to travel great distances for a shared spiritual experience diminished when your community, your gods, and your rituals were all right there in the village with you. In this new, settled world, the monumental effort required to maintain may have simply lost its practical and social urgency. The hilltop was not forgotten, but its active purpose was complete. Yet to think this marks an end is to misunderstand its true impact. It was a cultural seed, and its ideas were carried forward into the new age. The distinctive T-shape of its great pillars did not vanish. Centuries later, at other Neolithic sites we find smaller, more refined versions of these same T-shaped stones, now incorporated into village architecture. The form had persisted, scaled down and adapted, but still recognizable as an architectural echo of that much older sanctuary. Even more profoundly, the symbolic language carved into the limestone evolved. The powerful, wild animals that covered the pillars, the foxes, snakes, and birds of prey, did not disappear from the human imagination. As people tamed the landscape, they also transformed their symbols. The untamed bull of the hunt slowly became the bull associated with the storm god, a domesticated symbol of celestial power. The protective lion evolved into a guardian of temples and thrones. The rich vocabulary of the wild was translated into the iconography of the first cities, giving form to the gods of Mesopotamia. The spiritual concepts first explored on that Turkish hilltop, the ideas of ancestor veneration, communal ritual, and cosmic order, became the bedrock of later religions and state ideologies. Was not a dead end. It was a profound beginning, a creative explosion whose cultural DNA was woven into the fabric of every complex society that followed. Its burial was not an erasure, but a passing of the torch. The builders returned their masterpiece to the earth, and in doing so, ensured that its silent message would one day be found, reminding us that our civilization's deepest roots are far older and far more mysterious than we ever dared to dream. Unearthing a site this ancient is an exercise in patience and precision. Modern archaeology is a far cry from the treasure hunts of old. It is a careful, destructive conversation with the earth. Before a single trowel touches the soil, teams use advanced technology like ground-penetrating radar. This allows them to see through the soil, creating a detailed map of buried walls, pillars, and enclosures still hidden below, guiding their work without disturbing a single grain of earth. It is like having a blueprint of the past, drawn by the past itself. When excavation begins, it is a painstakingly slow process. Every layer of that deliberate backfill, placed there 11,000 years ago, is removed by hand with small tools. Brushes and dental picks are often used to gently clear soil from the intricate carvings of a fox or a snake. Every find, from a tiny flint tool to a fragment of animal bone, is recorded with laser precision. Its exact location in three-dimensional space is logged, capturing its relationship to everything else around it. This digital record is crucial. It allows researchers to virtually reconstruct the site, understanding not just what was found, but the story of how it was placed there. The preservation of the stone itself is a constant battle. The limestone pillars, exposed to sun, wind, and rain after a protective burial, are vulnerable. Conservators work to stabilize the surfaces, protecting the delicate carvings from the very elements that once preserved them. This is not a race. The scale of the site is staggering, with geophysical surveys suggesting many more monumental circles still lie buried, waiting. Only a small percentage has been fully excavated, meaning the hill likely holds secrets we have not yet dreamed of. Each season of work is a step in a decades-long journey, ensuring that every conclusion about is built on a foundation of meticulous evidence. We are not just digging up artifacts, we are learning how to listen, piecing together a forgotten story one careful brushstroke at a time. Has fundamentally rewritten the rules of archaeology. For decades, the dominant theory was a tidy staircase of human progress, a clear, linear path where each step logically led to the next. First, people learned to farm. Agriculture created surplus food, which allowed populations to settle and grow. This settlement led to social stratification, specialized jobs, and only then, with this established complexity, could humanity muster the organization to build monumental architecture. It was a compelling and logical story, one that placed economics and environment at the core of our ascent. This discovery on a Turkish hilltop has effectively removed several of those steps, revealing not a staircase, but a web of possibilities. It proves that cultural complexity, the ability to organize large groups toward a single, long-term goal, did not require the engine of agriculture. It could flourish within hunter-gatherer societies, driven by something less tangible but equally powerful, a shared ideology. The pillars are not a byproduct of surplus grain. They are the physical manifestation of a collective belief so strong it could move mountains, or at least 20-ton blocks of limestone. This forces a dramatic revision of social evolution theories. We can no longer view monument building as a mere symptom of an advanced, settled society. Instead, we must consider it as a potential cause, a catalyst that itself can forge the social cohesion necessary for other advances. Ideology and collective ritual are now understood as primary drivers of human organization, capable of motivating cooperation on a scale we once thought impossible for that era. Stands as a monumental cautionary tale for all of history. It is a powerful, stone-carved reminder that the past is not a puzzle we have already solved, but a landscape still shrouded in mist. Our models of how things must have happened are always provisional, always waiting for the next discovery to refine or completely shatter our understanding. This single site has opened an entirely new field of inquiry. It encourages archaeologists to shed old assumptions and look with fresh eyes at other regions of the globe. Where else might pre-agricultural societies have gathered to express their cosmology in stone? Could similar ceremonial centers, buried by time or simply unrecognized under older labels, be waiting on hilltops in Central Asia or the Americas or East Africa? The implications are global. Each potential discovery promises to rewrite not just a local timeline, but our universal story of what it means to become civilized. The quiet message from those ancient builders is clear. Our history is deeper, stranger, and far more creative than our textbooks ever allowed. The carvings whisper a story that feels strangely familiar. Across a gulf of 11,000 years, the symbols of wild bulls, coiled serpents, and watchful birds seem to resonate with myths and legends written down later. This leads us to a tantalizing mystery. Could these stone images be distant, ancestral echoes of the great stories that would later define civilizations? While we must be careful not to draw simplistic lines, the parallels invite us to consider a profound continuity in the human imagination. Take, for example, the world's oldest known written epic, the Mesopotamian tale of Gilgamesh. In that story, the hero ventures into the untamed cedar forest to confront its monstrous guardian, and later battles the bull of heaven. These are narratives fundamentally about the struggle between the ordered world of human culture and the raw, dangerous power of nature. That same thematic tension is carved into every pillar at. The site is a gallery of untamed power, foxes, lions, scorpions, and boars, all creatures that represent the wild world beyond human control. The very act of gathering to build a monumental sanctuary in their honor could be seen as an early, physical expression of that same eternal dialogue, an attempt to negotiate with, understand, or perhaps symbolically master the forces of nature through ritual. Furthermore, the hilltop itself fits a universal archetype. Across countless cultures, from Greece to Japan, from the Americas to India, sacred mountains are seen as meeting places between heaven and earth, the abodes of gods or ancestors. A man-made mountain of stone and soil erected on a natural high point perfectly embodies this concept. It was literally constructed to be a meeting place, a liminal zone where the community could connect with something greater. This suggests that certain core ideas about the structure of the cosmos and humanity's place within it may have incredibly deep roots, originating in the pre-pottery Neolithic and persisting, transforming, but never entirely vanishing. Drawing a direct lineage from a specific carving to a specific character in a later myth is likely impossible and misses the point. What is far more compelling is the possibility that represents an early monumental crystallization of foundational mythological themes. The veneration of powerful animals, the concept of a sacred axis linking worlds, the communal ritual to reaffirm order, these are the basic building blocks of so much that came later. The site may have been one of the first physical anchors for stories that were told and retold, evolving with each generation, eventually finding their way onto clay tablets and into holy texts. In this light, the hilltop is not an isolated artifact, but a profound beginning. It is a testament to the enduring power of the stories we tell ourselves to make sense of a mysterious world. Stories first given form not in words, but in stone, under a sky filled with the same stars that would later inspire poets, priests, and kings. The ground itself holds the memory of those gatherings. Scattered among the foundations of the stone circles, archaeologists have unearthed a staggering volume of animal remains, the bones of aurochs, gazelle, and wild sheep piled in numbers that defy a simple explanation. This is not the debris of daily meals. This is the archaeological signature of a feast, a deliberate, large-scale event that fed not a family, but a community. The sheer quantity tells us these were monumental occasions, likely the culmination of a season's labor or a sacred calendar marker. Picture the scene as the last pillar is set, the carvings completed. The air would have been thick with the scent of roasting meat, the sound of hundreds of people sharing in a hard-won harvest from the hunt. This was far more than just a meal after a long day's work. Feasting is one of humanity's oldest and most powerful social technologies. When we share food, we do more than nourish our bodies. We reinforce trust, we create reciprocal obligation, and we weave the invisible threads that bind a group into a cohesive whole. This practice was likely the beating heart of the entire endeavor. The feast was the reward, the motivator, and the glue. It provided the necessary calories to sustain the builders through their back-breaking labor, turning practical need into a celebration of shared purpose. But its deeper function was social alchemy. In a world without formal governments or written contracts, trust was the most valuable currency. By coming together, contributing to the hunt, and sharing equally in the bounty, different bands and clans demonstrated their commitment to the collective project. They were literally building trust, one shared meal at a time. This repeated cycle of collaborative work and communal celebration may have been a foundational innovation. It taught early societies how to cooperate on a scale never before attempted, forging the social networks and shared identity that would later become the bedrock of villages, towns, and cities. The grand feasts on that Turkish hilltop were not just parties, they were workshops for civilization itself, where the menu included cooperation, and the main course was community. The landscape itself was a partner in this creation. To understand why rose at that precise moment, we must step back and see the world as its builders did. They were emerging from the long, cold grip of the last ice age. For thousands of years, vast glaciers had locked away much of the planet's water, leaving many regions dry, cold, and challenging for human life. But around 12,000 years ago, a profound shift began. The global climate started to warm. Ice sheets retreated and weather patterns changed. In the region of southeastern Turkey, this meant more rainfall and milder temperatures. What was once a relatively arid steppe began to bloom. Lush grasses spread across the plains, and wild stands of einkorn wheat and barley thrived in the newly fertile soils. Animal populations, from herds of gazelle and aurochs to flocks of migrating birds, flourished in this abundance. This was the dawn of the current geological epoch, a time of incredible environmental opportunity. The people living through this transformation were not just passive observers. They were witnesses to a world literally coming back to life, a spectacle of renewal unfolding over generations. This environmental context is not a mere backdrop, it is a crucial character in the story. The increasing stability and richness of the ecosystem provided something essential, a resource buffer. When nature is harsh and unpredictable, every waking moment is dedicated to survival. But when the land offers more reliable food sources, when game is plentiful and wild grains are abundant, it creates a surplus of something just as vital as food, time, and energy. People could plan further ahead. They could afford to take risks, to invest effort in projects that did not yield an immediate meal. This climatic grace period offered a window, and the builders of it did not just look through it, they built a monument within its frame. The hill they chose is itself a statement. It rises prominently from the surrounding plain, offering a 360-degree view of the newly fertile world below. From that vantage point, you can see the horizons where the wild cereals grew thick and the migratory routes the animals would have followed. This was not a hidden, secret place. It was a deliberate stage, set high above the bounty that made its construction possible. The sanctuary is, therefore, a direct response to its environment. It is an expression of gratitude, an attempt at understanding, or a ritual effort to ensure the continuity of this newfound abundance. They built their temple at the very moment the earth offered them the means to do so, capturing a fleeting golden age in immortal stone. Their achievement stands as a powerful reminder that human culture does not develop in a vacuum. It is a conversation with the world around us, a dialogue between the human spirit and the possibilities the planet provides. In this case, a changing climate whispered of new potential, and a group of visionary people answered with a chorus of carved pillars, a testament to what humanity can create when given the chance. The placement of each stone circle on that ancient hilltop is its own silent language. As you walk across the excavated sections, you do not see a haphazard cluster of buildings, but a deliberate arrangement of distinct, separated enclosures scattered across the summit. This spatial logic forms the 13th great mystery of, why are they positioned just so? Some researchers looking at the layout see more than practical construction, they see a potential map of the cosmos itself. The idea is compelling. Perhaps each enclosure did not serve an identical purpose, but represented a different stage in a spiritual journey or a different realm within a belief system. One circle, dominated by carvings of snakes and birds, might have symbolized an underworld or a celestial domain. Another, filled with depictions of foxes and boars, could have represented the earthly plane of animals and hunters. The very act of moving from one enclosure to the next during a ceremony could have been a physical pilgrimage through a symbolic landscape, a walking meditation through their understanding of the universe. This transforms the hilltop from a collection of temples into a three-dimensional storybook, where architecture becomes narrative. The central pairs of pillars in each ring deepen this symbolism. These towering twins, always the largest in their circle, likely held profound significance. They may have acted as portals or gateways, marking the transition into the most sacred part of the ritual space. Alternatively, they could represent founding ancestors or twin deities, watching over the proceedings from their central, unmoving posts. Their consistent presence and prominence suggest they were the focal point, the axis around which all other activity and meaning revolved. While archaeologists debate the exact pattern and its interpretation, the overwhelming sense of intentional design is undeniable. Nothing about feels accidental. The alignment of the enclosures, the spacing between them, the specific orientations of the entrances, all point to a master plan conceived long before the first pillar was. This was a sacred geography, a monumental effort to give tangible, permanent form to a spiritual worldview. They were not just building structures, they were constructing a model of reality as they understood it, organizing the chaos of the spiritual world into an orderly, walkable landscape of stone. To stand among these circles is to walk through someone else's map of meaning, a territory where every turn and every carved symbol was a deliberate step on a path we are still learning to follow. The stone circles were not silent chambers, they were instruments. Recent acoustic studies have revealed that the architecture of them may have been designed to shape sound itself. Enclosed by hard, reflective limestone pillars, these spaces were not just visual arenas, they were resonant chambers. A single voice raised in chant, or the steady beat of a hand on a taut hide drum, would not have dissipated into the open air. Instead, the sound would have bounced and echoed between the smooth stone surfaces, creating a reverberating, amplifying effect that filled the entire enclosure. This transforms our understanding of the ceremonies held here. The experience was not merely observed, it was felt in the very bones. The low rumble of a chant could have seemed to emanate from the stone figures themselves, while rhythmic percussion might have felt like the heartbeat of the hill. This intentional acoustic design points to a sophisticated understanding of sensory immersion. The builders were not just creating a place to see, they were crafting an environment to be absorbed into, a space where sound could alter perception and deepen the psychological impact of ritual. Imagine the profound difference between hearing a story told in an open field and hearing it resonate within a stone circle that seems to breathe with the voices of ancestors. This auditory layer turns the enclosures into theaters of total experience, where architecture, art, and sound combine to transport participants out of the everyday world and into a heightened state of communal connection. The very stones were engineered to carry the human voice across, a whisper of ceremony preserved not in artifact, but in the physics of the space they so carefully built. The silent stones tell us nothing about who lifted them, but the question of gender opens a window into the society behind the sanctuary. When we picture the immense labor of moving 20-ton pillars, our minds often jump to images of large groups of men straining against ropes. This assumption, however, may be a modern projection onto a world that operated by different social rules. While the most physically demanding tasks likely involved the strongest individuals, which could have included men, the true engine of it was its social organization, a machine that required every part of the community to function. The construction was not a single act of strength, but a sustained, generational project woven from countless roles. Consider the vast feasts that fueled the workers. The preparation of food on such a scale, the gathering of wild grains, the processing of meat, and the preservation of supplies for hundreds of people was a monumental logistical task in itself. This work, essential to the entire endeavor, almost certainly involved the knowledge and labor of women. Similarly, the creation of the tools and materials needed for construction was a specialized craft. Making strong ropes from plant fibers for hauling the stones, weaving textiles for clothing and possibly for ceremonial use, and even producing the containers to hold food and water, all required skilled hands and deep practical knowledge. These roles were not peripheral, they were foundational. They turned a collection of individuals into a functioning, coordinated society capable of a century-long project. To attribute the achievement solely to one gender is to see only the pillars and miss the intricate social fabric that made them stand. The site itself offers a subtle, fragmented clue. From a later layer archaeologists recovered a broken piece of stone carved with a distinctive figure. It depicts a headless, stylized form with emphasized features, often interpreted by researchers as a symbolic representation of the feminine, perhaps a goddess or an ancestor. While this single artifact cannot define an entire belief system, its existence is significant. It tells us that female symbolism was present in their iconography, suggesting that concepts of creation, fertility, or protective power were part of their spiritual landscape and likely honored in their rituals. This carving is a whisper that the spiritual life of the community, which motivated the construction in the first place, was not the domain of one group alone. The stewardship of symbolic knowledge, the passing down of the stories connected to each animal carving, the timing of ceremonies linked to the stars, these were forms of power and responsibility that transcended physical strength. In its silent complexity, challenges us to move beyond simplistic divisions. It presents a model of a collaborative prehistoric society, where the monumental emerged not from the labor of a single group, but from the integrated contributions of an entire community, each bringing essential knowledge, skill, and belief to the sacred hill. Their legacy is not just in the stone they raised, but in the invisible, cooperative world they built to raise it. The hill still holds most of its secrets beneath the earth. After decades of work, archaeologists estimate they have uncovered only about 5% of the total site. What remains buried is a promise, a vast and silent archive waiting for its pages to be turned. Future excavations will slowly reveal more of the monumental plan. They may uncover additional stone circles, each with its own unique arrangement of pillars and carvings, expanding the sacred geography we are only beginning to map. Researchers also hope to find areas beyond the ceremonial core, perhaps workshops where tools were made, or temporary living quarters for those who journeyed to the hill. Every new trench dug is a step into the unknown. The tools of discovery are evolving as rapidly as our theories. Beyond shovels and brushes, science offers new ways to listen to the past. Microscopic residue analysis on stone tools could detect traces of plants, pigments, or other materials used in rituals, telling us not just what they built, but what they held in their hands during ceremonies. Should researchers be fortunate enough to discover a resting place associated with the builders, genetic studies could trace their ancestral origins and connections across the ancient landscape. Ground-penetrating radar and other remote sensing technologies will continue to scan the depths, creating a clearer picture of the hidden layout before a single grain of soil is moved. For all we have learned, the most profound questions echo louder than ever. We can describe the carvings, but we cannot yet hear the stories they tell. What was the precise meaning of the fox, the crane, or the scorpion to the person who carved it? We can infer large-scale feasting, but the exact nature of the rituals, the chants, the dances, and the moments of silence within those circles remains a mystery veiled by a leaven. The reason for the site's careful burial, while we have compelling theories, lacks a definitive explanation from those who performed the act. It is not a puzzle we have solved. It is a conversation we have just begun. This makes it one of the most active and exciting chapters in modern archaeology. It is not a closed book sitting on a museum shelf, but a living document being written with every season of research. Each new discovery has the potential to add a line, a paragraph, or an entirely new chapter to the human story we thought we knew. The true legacy of may ultimately be this: it taught us humility before the depth of time and filled us with a renewed wonder for what our species is capable of imagining. The next turn of the archaeologist's trowel might reveal the next sentence. Stands as a monumental challenge to our historical narrative, a stone-built question mark from the dawn of time. It teaches us that human capacity for complex thought, artistic expression, and large-scale cooperation emerged far earlier than we ever imagined. This site rewrote history by proving that the temple came before the city, that community and belief could mobilize people long before kings and empires. As we look at these ancient pillars, we are reminded that history is not a straight line, but a rich tapestry of possibilities. Let this discovery inspire you to question established stories and marvel at the endless ingenuity of humanity. If you found this journey into our deep past fascinating, subscribe for more explorations into history's greatest mysteries and share your thoughts in the comments below.